Welcome to this edition of Tuesday Talks with Twyla. Today we're going to talk about a concept that I think is really important and one that I just saw a different perspective on, and it really piqued my interest. So if you have followed me at all, you've heard me talk about how we talk to ourselves, how we treat ourselves, how we value ourselves, or how worthy we are. So I want to present this in some different ways because I feel like sometimes we'll relate to certain language or certain nuances or concepts, and others we don't. I know I fall into this category, and so sometimes when I'm listening to my coaches, even though they might be talking about some of the same things multiple times, sometimes they'll just say it differently enough that it's like, oh, and I connect with it, or I resonate with it, or it lands differently. So I wanted to bring this to you today because that's what happened for me. When I was reading this concept today, I was like, that hits differently. And I know that my clients struggle with how they value themselves, how they treat themselves, how they talk to themselves. And it's not always where they connect with how worthy they are, or I guess the worthiness, really. It's more like if they're valued or if they value themselves. And the concept that I ran across this morning was related to when we assign that value based on things outside of us. And I noticed that I maybe do this in some instances. And I thought, oh, that's interesting because I think this can happen without us sometimes realizing it. And so I wanted to talk about that today because if any of this relates to you, I always think that asking different questions, asking the right questions can sometimes reveal to us things about ourselves that maybe other questions weren't revealing for us. And awareness is the first step always. And so if we're not aware of it, we don't know what's happening, we don't have that eyes on it, that watcher on it, we're just not aware of it. And so this is that like pre-programmed thinking or the go-to thoughts that are playing in the background, like the white noise. And if we don't know that's there, especially when it comes to our value or how we value ourselves or how we show up, how we treat ourselves, that's a big deal. And it's definitely something that can affect a lot of different areas of our lives. And so I wanted to bring this to you to hopefully raise some awareness around these concepts and see if you can unlock something that might be a block for you. My coaching is always based around finding our hidden blocks because these are the things that are there that we're just not aware of. And I will teach you the tools and show you the techniques always. But sometimes we can't see these for ourselves. And for me, it took these different questions or these different reframing to go, oh, I might do this sometimes. And so having that different perspective, having a coach, having someone work with you, doing the work with you, for sure is more advantageous, but having more resources, having more questions, having more perspective, different angles, different reframing can obviously help as well, right? So the concept of value, when we apply it to ourselves, should come from within. We should decide what that is. we should establish that for ourselves. And obviously, I'm going to say that it should be at the utmost level, right? The highest level. We should always value ourselves to the highest degree, to the highest extent, right? Because why not? We're all 100% worthy. We're all complete and valuable and 100% always. And our past or things we've done, things that make us feel guilt or shame, things we're embarrassed about, none of that affects that level of value or that level of worthiness. None of it does. It's just not the way it works. It's concepts or interpretations that we've applied from things we've gathered around us, right? People we've put up on pedestals, which means if we've put them up, we've put us down, right? And you see this, right, in social media, and you see it in TV shows, and you see it in reality TV shows, and you see it everywhere around us, outside of us. So we have to be really careful about this because we can pick that stuff up sometimes without even realizing it. And I do have a Tuesday talk about picking up a penny. And I love that concept, right? Because we grab these things like finding a penny in the parking lot and we put it in our pocket and we just keep it and we take it on for ourselves, sometimes unintentionally. And we want to know and be intentional about everything we're thinking, especially about ourselves, right? So let's go through some of these to see if this breaks something loose for you, if this unlocks something that you might have be going on for you. So you can derive your value from things that from other people, from things outside of you, things you associate yourself with, and your like role in those relationships or your role with those outside, whatever they are, right? Coworkers, family, just different environments, just anything outside of you, right? So here are some examples, scenarios that when I was reading through here, I was like, wow, like this kind of landed a little differently for me. So feeling more valuable when you're dating someone impressive, as if their status makes you more worthy by association. So I did a little reflection. I just thought back and thought, wow, maybe I've done that before. Maybe I've thought that. I've fallen into that before. Or wanted to date someone because I considered them impressive. I thought maybe people would look at me differently if I was dating someone like that. I'm sure I've had those thoughts go through my mind. Deriving most of your worth from being needed, feeling valuable only when you're helping or taking care of others. So I think this is one that, especially women that have children or have aging parents or have anyone that you have some responsibility for, I think you can slip into this without realizing it because we are needed, right? When we have babies, we have infants, we're obviously very needed. They can't fend for themselves, they can't take care of themselves. So we're very much needed. And we sometimes critique ourselves or evaluate ourselves or judge ourselves based on how well we think we're taking care of our baby. There cries a lot, whether it's a happy baby, whether it's learning and progressing like it's supposed to, all of those things. We take full responsibility for that, right? And so then we can tie our value or our worth to that, right? To being needed or our level of what we're judging as how good we are at taking care of that child, infant, or aging parents. Measuring your worth by whose approval you can earn. So this might happen in the workplace, right? And so it can be something that you for sure might do without realizing, striving to, I wanted to say impress, but impress a boss or impress a supervisor or possibly open up an opportunity. And the alternative is feeling less valuable when someone you admire doesn't notice you. So that might be more personal, right? But it might be in the workplace as well. You might have a leader or a supervisor or a boss or a manager that you do admire, and they don't notice the hard work that you put in. They don't even notice how you put in the extra hours, how you got that report done well in advance, how there wasn't any errors in the report, right? Like all the different things. And we start measuring our worth or our value based on these things, the approval that we've earned or not getting noticed. That was one too that I was like, wow, I'm pretty sure I've done that before. Building your identity around being someone's partner or parent rather than having an independent sense of self. This is another one that I think really, like, we don't even realize that this might be happening. And especially if, like I've got my two youngest are teenagers, and in just a few short years, they're going to, leave the house and I'm going to be an empty nester. And I'm pretty sure that I have some of my identity built around having boys in the house, having to make supper and make sure the pantry's stocked and make sure there's milk in the fridge. And with, just, and I don't want to say without realizing it, because I do realize that I do that, and I accept that, and I want that identity right now, right? And I probably won't want that to end either. But just notice if you don't have that independent sense of self, that you have some building of your identity around things outside of you. This can happen. You might notice this when, a marriage splits up and your identity was built around being that person's wife, being that person's partner. For sure, maybe your life or even like your friend groups or, your coworkers and, your like work parties and happy hour and things like that were all built around what you guys did as a couple. And sometimes we build our identity around those things, and it can feel shattering when something like that changes. Same thing with a job or a position, that you either lose your job or the business closes or something happens where that changes, possibly with or without it being your decision. It can really shake our identity, and we might have to rebuild that. And just know that our identity comes from, our identity by definition is the thoughts we think about ourselves, right? And we've just built that identity around whatever that is, that job, that position, that business, that organization, that partner, my role in the family, or my role in my immediate family, or my my parents and my siblings. So we do that, right? And sometimes we just have to rebuild that, but knowing that and knowing what that means. Feeling worthless when alone because your value feels like it only exists in relation to others. So this can be a big one, right? This can be one of those where you just are not content just being with yourself. And that's going to come from your thoughts about yourself. Because when you're alone, it's just you and your thoughts. It's just you and how you talk to yourself. It's just you and how you treat yourself. It's just your own either identity or value. It's just you, yourself, and you, right? And so if it's difficult to be alone, if you feel worthless when you're alone, that might come from some of those values that you've associated with people around you, being with them, being around them, being part of those circles or those relationships or those groups. And then when it's not there and you're feeling a certain way. So as you go through all of this, right? Like the the key thing here is that we feel our value is, right? Our feelings come from our thoughts. And so I always want to make sure that anytime there's any association or we're building these things or we're relating them to things outside of us, we want to build our awareness around that. We want to get that into our consciousness. We want to take a look at that because that's all outside of our control, 100%. The people, the jobs, the way they treat us, what they think of us, the way they talk to us, all of that stuff completely out of our control. What's within our control is the thoughts that we think about them, about our relationship, about, any of it, right? About whether they're impressive or not. That's a thought that we think. Whether you know, they're considering how well we take care of them or how well we, show up for them. If we admire someone or look up to them, right? That's based on our thoughts about them. And then having some dependency around our identity. Again, our identity is our thoughts about ourselves. And then associating it to having someone around us. And so when they're gone, we're just left with ourselves. So understanding that all of this, all of it always points back to the thoughts that we are thinking. And that's what creates how we feel, how we identify ourselves, which is our identity, how we talk to ourselves, how we treat ourselves, how we value ourselves, and how worthy we feel, right? Those are all feelings, and all of our feelings come from our thoughts. And we allow those, and allow, I think, is a tricky word. It is allow, right? Because we have free will, but we allow those thoughts and concepts and ideals to be influenced by things around us. And so we can start thinking a certain way, which is influenced by the people we're around, our coworkers, our bosses, our leaders, right? Our parents, our children, our role in our lives, and all of these other relationships. So it's influenced. And sometimes we want it to be that way, right? I love the role of being the mom, being responsible for getting the milk and having the pantry stocked. I love that role. I have 4 boys. I love it. Would have had probably a lot more. My husband would have let me at the time. But it's not, and I recognize that that's who I am right now. That's the role I play in their lives, and they're teenagers, right? They can go buy milk. If I don't buy milk, they can go to the store and buy milk. They got money, they got a car. So I don't have to do that. I want to. I love it. I want to. And I'm good with that. It's intentional and I'm good with those reasons. And I know that that identity is going to shift. There's going to be a time where either me or my husband can put milk in the fridge and he won't be dependent on me doing it and I won't be dependent on him doing it, right? There won't be anybody depending on me for any of that stuff. And that'll be identity shift for me. And I know that's coming and I'm very aware of it. And I'm, very intentional about staying on top of how I'm thinking, how I'm talking to myself, how I'm, identifying who I am. And so I'm aware of all of that. But that's the work, right? Is being consciously aware of what those things are, what those thoughts are, how we value ourselves. And so how I value myself in that the amount of value won't change, but my identity will change. And that's okay. Like I won't be less valued in the world or in my life or as a person because nobody's depending on me to put a gallon of milk in the fridge. Right? My value is not going to change based on that, but my identity will. And that's okay, right? It's coming, it's going to happen, and I'm, going to be able to shift and transition into a different version of myself. But my value isn't going to change. I'll be as valuable those days as I am these days. 100%. None of that changes. So I don't tie my value to my identity, but my identity will shift. And same thing with, when you have infants as opposed to having teenagers, when you are in this role at work and then you move into that role. Or if you get demoted or they reorganize and your position gets classified differently. And if you take that to mean it's a demotion and they don't appreciate who you are and now you're not valued anymore, those are all your thoughts about it, right? Sometimes reorganizations need to happen, and it's not necessarily about the value you bring, it's where you fit into the entire organization. Everyone has value, right? And so it doesn't necessarily need to be tied to what you've identified as a certain level of value, because how you identify the level of value is based on your thinking. We get to decide all of it, but we want to be conscious and intentional about it, right? We've got to know that that's what we're thinking. And some of these scenarios were like, oh, very interesting, very eye-opening. I felt like it was a really different way of taking a look at how we value ourselves or how we feel our worth or our worthiness is in what was very practical, very specific scenarios to kind of like put yourself in those positions and take a look at, like, how do I think of myself in this position? How do I think of myself in that position? And very interesting. I loved this. Absolutely loved it. It was thought-provoking for me. It was eye-opening. It was building a different level of awareness around how I think about myself and being able to maybe look at some of those thoughts and maybe make some decisions around them. Again, like, how do I value myself related to my role in the family and how that's going to change, and being prepared for that. And that's going to be a mindset shift, right? That'll be work that I'll need to do. And that will be a mindset, an identity, right? It'll be all of that, which is all tied to the way that I think about myself, about my role in the family, about my family itself, about everyone around me, all of that. And those are all my thoughts and my decisions that I get to make. I get to decide all of it. But we want to be intentional about it. And we want to love our reasons. We always want to be the decision maker, and we want to love our reasons. I love being a mom. I love being the responsible person, and I will love my next role, the next version of myself, and it'll look differently, and that's okay, right? That's the human evolution. That's how we change and evolve through life. Those are the phases that we go through. And so I hope this was thought-provoking for you, and it was a different perspective to take a look at how you maybe look at yourself, how you think of yourself, how you think of your value, your worth, your identity, and really kind of play with that and take a look at yeah, what do you think about some of that stuff? And have you ever associated some of that within some of those scenarios? I know I sure have. And so that was really interesting for me to kind of reveal that to myself and build a little more awareness around that, which I always love. I always think that that's anything that can crack open in a different way, a different question, a different perspective. Just love that, right? That's what we do as coaches. We try to find the best questions. We try to ask things in lots of different ways to break open and unlock some of those hidden blocks that they're hard to find sometimes. And so I hope this was as enlightening for you as it was for me. I really enjoyed it. I hope you drop me a message and let me know what you thought and what maybe you discovered as you went through some of those scenarios, how it felt for you, and what came up, what you related to, what you maybe have associated in the past and maybe are currently that you want to take a look at and do some work around. So any questions or comments, I'd love to hear it. Until next week, I hope you have an amazing week. I'll see you next week.